photographs of different players, really covering almost 100 years of baseball history. And in particular, this exhibit is, dealing with Negro League, Cuban and Latin American baseball. So it's a very fun thing.
And thank you to everyone joining us on Facebook Live. Welcome to Northern Kentucky History Hour. I am Mary Jane Calderon. I do the communications here at the museum, and I have alongside me our Mr. Curator, Curator of Collections, Jason French. So thank you for joining us tonight. We are going to be getting started shortly. It's about 6:27. So we will start in about a few more minutes or so. So thanks again. This little crowd here, Jason.
Oh, that's good.
I've mentioned this to everyone on Zoom, but in case you're joining us on Facebook, Jason and I are in the middle of the Diverse Diamonds exhibit here at the museum. Do you want to say a little bit about this exhibit?
Well, the exhibit is going to be up here hopefully for a next few weeks. It's been up actually a good chunk of the year. So hopefully if you've had an opportunity to come and visit us here at Behringer-Crawford, you might have had the opportunity to see it. It's a pretty special exhibit, full of more history than I can cover tonight, and baseball history.
It's going to be a good talk, good presentation tonight.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
So thank you to everyone that is joining us and everyone on Facebook Live, everyone in Zoom. We've got a few more people coming in, so we're going to keep letting those people in. And did we start recording? We need to do that.
Yeah, we probably do.
Make sure we do that. Okay, and we are recording. It is 6:29. We got about another minute or so, and then we're going to get started. So thanks again for joining us.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah. Like, what do you want to talk about, Jason, for a minute or so, about how great this presentation is going to be?
Oh, yes. It's going to be a wonderful presentation.
Really excited about it.
It is. It's such a tremendous subject.
No, this is really a great exhibit that we have here.
It is. It's a fun exhibit. And it's, if you like baseball at all, there's something for everybody in this exhibit.
Yes. So I encourage you, if you have not come in to see it yet, to please come in and see it. What just happened there?
Oh, yeah, technical difficulties.
I don't know why. Hopefully, there we are. Okay.
Can you hear anyone?
There we are.
Can you hear anyone?
If you haven't already, please, you should have been muted when you were joining, but please have yourself on mute so we can focus on the presentation. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. It's about 6:30. So here we go. Okay, so thank you for joining us for Northern Kentucky History Hour. Let's see. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Northern Kentucky History Hour. I'm your host for tonight, Mary Jane Calderon. I do communications here at the museum. Here alongside me is Mr. Jason French, our Curator of Collections. Northern Kentucky History Hour is a project of Behringer-Crawford Museum, Northern Kentucky's History Museum. Let's begin by thanking all of those that make this program possible. So Behringer-Crawford Museum is supported in part by the City of Covington, Kenton County Fiscal Court, ArtsWave, Kentucky Arts Council, Northern Kentucky Sports Hall of Fame, the Carol Ann and Ralph D. Hale Jr. U.S. Bank Foundation, and our members. If you're not yet a member of the museum, please consider joining us for access to discounts and exclusive programming. Learn more and join at bcmuseum.org. Before we begin, let's go over a few reminders. Everyone's microphone has been muted so we can all focus on the presentation. Feel free to turn off your video if you prefer. Otherwise, others on the call are able to see you, even when the screen is being shared. If you have a question or comment to share, please type it in the chat feature, and we will try to get to as many questions as possible immediately following the presentation. Also, there's going to be a quiz question tonight. So the first respondent to enter a correct answer in the chat on Zoom or on Facebook Live will get a Northern Kentucky History Hour pin and bragging rights, most importantly. So let's go ahead and we're going to meet tonight's speaker. So Jason French, who joined the museum in 2017, holds a master's in public applied history from Northern Kentucky University and a bachelor's in interpretive history from Ohio University. He previously served as coordinator of costume interpretation for the Cincinnati Museum Center. Jason, welcome.
How is everybody tonight?
Hopefully everyone can hear us good, right? Thumbs up if you can hear us good. You can see us good. Yeah, great.
Excellent.
Okay, so are we ready? You want to go ahead and let's go ahead and share our screen.
Yeah, let's go ahead and share the screen. This exhibit and this subject matter is a pretty special one. I want to kind of give you all a few caveats, if I can, as we discuss this. My job as curator here at the Behringer-Crawford Museum is taking in collections, and I get the privilege of also helping create and build exhibits. But we cover a lot of different history subjects in our museum. So what happens is I learn enough about a subject matter to, as I sometimes tease, to be dangerous. So I want to introduce you to this subject matter, but please don't think of me as an expert, somebody who is, this is a subject matter that really could easily have a lifetime of study that I, unfortunately, as much as I would love to spend that time studying the subject matter because it's a wonderful topic, I don't always have the time to do it. So I'm going to share with you some of the treasures we have and a few of the stories that I have gleaned and I've learned as I've been studying and as we've created this exhibit. And I just kind of want to introduce you to this subject because it's something that I was not that familiar with. And we've had the honor to actually house this exhibit, and it's going to become a permanent part of our collection, and hopefully we'll be able to do more with it in the future. I've kind of got some fun plans for it in the future. So I wanted to share this with you while the exhibit's still up and talk to you a little bit about the subject matter. We call it a diverse diamond. And the reason that we do that is because when we think historic times in Major League Baseball, Major Leagues it was segregated for so long, but there were these other, in segregation, we had different people of color, different areas that had their own leagues and their own baseball play. And we're sharing that and talking about it here in this exhibit, which is pretty exciting for us. There's so much in this exhibit. There's 160 or so autographs of all the major players that you really think about, or the most of the major players that you think about. And there's just so many different subjects that we can kind of focus on. So I'm going to give you a broad overview. Let's start with
the quiz question.
Yes, we'll start with the quiz question.
Okay, let's see here. Okay, so our quiz question for tonight is, in what year was the first Negro World Series played? So the first person to be able, you have time, the first person who enters this question or answers this question correctly in the chat on Zoom or on Facebook Live will get a nice little button prize. And for bonus questions, though, Jason had a couple bonuses he wanted to throw in there. So what were the names of the teams that played in that game? And then what was the name of the Kentuckian that played in that series? So keep those in mind. I will also make sure to I'll type these in the chat.
So we're going to start a little bit before, we're going to start with baseball and African-American baseball before the Negro Leagues. baseball really, as a sport, its history goes back. There's forms of town ball, and there's forms of other baseball. They go back maybe even into the 18th century. But around the time of the American Civil War, we start to see a game that we would recognize as baseball. And post-Civil War, you start having teams like the Cincinnati Reds, certainly in 1869. Those teams, and we start getting professional ball. Within the African-American community, in the late 19th century, we start seeing Black teams or African-American teams starting to play in when they're in the Army, when they're in universities and things. You start seeing kind of segregated baseball begin. Before you, we've got a wonderful family photo of a woman that volunteers with me named Martha. And Martha brought this photograph in, and she said this was in her family history, her family photo. This is of a baseball team in Wolf Pit, Kentucky in 1916. Now, Wolf Pit is in Pike County, and this is a coal mine community. This is a coal camp in Pike County, almost to Virginia. And this team is of coal miners that actually that photograph is, as you look at it under magnification, it's a really pretty nice stadium and it's a great team. Well, Martha brought it to me and said, you know, this was in my dad's stuff. And I think my great uncle is in it. And that great uncle, she showed me a picture of her great uncle, and I looked at it, and yeah, he's right there in the back row. And if you're looking at it, I believe he's the third in on the left. He's in like a sweater. So here was her great uncle, and it was just such a neat photo. Now her family, her father's family, her grandfather, and probably her great uncle, they had all came from Alabama. They had been in Alabama, and they moved into working in coal mines at the early 20th century, and they ended up playing baseball. The other fun thing is, as I had that conversation with Martha, we realized that her grandfather is also in that photograph, and her father, who was born in 1914, is, if you look in that photograph, in the bottom row on the right-hand side, you'll see he's kind of blurry. There's a small child, and right behind him is probably his father. That the man behind the small child, I'm pretty certain, is Martha's grandfather, and that about a 2-year-old boy is Martha's father in that picture. So it's fun to kind of do a little of the genealogy and the ancestry and to help her understand a family history. But this is an organized African-American baseball team in Eastern Kentucky in 1916. So they're a coal camp team. They're not professional by any means, but they are the Wolf Pit team. And they would have been playing other African-American teams that were coal miners, and maybe they had a little circuit and there was visiting. So it was a company team of coal miners, and it's a really great image. So there was certainly Black or African-American baseball before really the founding of Negro League baseball. And you see that there were other men. There was a man named Wilkinson who, in the early 20th century, he's actually very important. And so I believe J.J. Wilkinson. J.J. he had exhibition teams. He was a baseball player. He was a white man, but he had teams He ran an exhibition team that traveled all over the country that was called the All Nations team. And he had individuals from different countries all over the world, different races, different ethnicities of all sorts, and they traveled around the country and played other teams. And Wilkinson was a pitcher for that team. He also, as a side note, Wilkinson's also interesting because he had another exhibition team that traveled. Both of these teams would travel with their own stadiums. They would come in with fencing and everything. And basically, if you had a field that was relatively flat, they could build a temporary stadium so they could play a game. He had a team called the Bloomer Girls. So it was a women's exhibition baseball team that may have had a couple of men playing on it just to fill out the team. But all of that was kind of happening in the early 20th century. So by about 1920, you start having the founding of what we think of as Negro League baseball. And those...
Would you like me to start the next slide or you?
Yeah, we can start that.
Okay.
So, and we're going to show a little bit from a case here. So Negro League baseball gets really started in 1920, and that gets started with a man named Rube Foster. Now Rube, he starts kind of organizing a separate league. And you're going to have just the same as when we have, the American League or the National League in Major League Baseball. You had like what we think of, we've kind of lumped a bunch of the African-American leagues together when we talk about Negro League baseball. But there was basically a Negro League, and then there was a Eastern Colored League that were amongst the first in that professional baseball as we think about. That was around 1920. And what you find, it's interesting, as I was talking about J.J. Wilkinson, right there, you can kind of see a card and everything, and a bobblehead about him. He, of course, is a white man. And in the early Negro League, they weren't interested in having a white owner. But because Wilkinson had these earlier teams, they allowed it. And Wilkinson starts a team called the Kansas City Monarchs. And that is the team really through the history of the Negro Leagues. The Monarchs was the team to really look at. So within a few years of getting this professional African-American, these leagues started, these professional leagues, they decided that it was probably time to have a World Series. So 1924, the Eastern Colored League and the Negro League play their first World Series. And ultimately, it was between two teams, of course, the Kansas City Monarchs and the Hilldale Athletic Club.
Answers to our trivia questions right there.
Right. Did we already have those? Did somebody?
I believe we did have a correct answer.
So we already had a
Yes,
correct
we did.
answer.
We had a couple, I believe.
Oh, excellent. So now the answer to the other part of the trivia question, which ties into this greater subject that I want to talk about. There was at least one Kentuckian, but one significant Kentuckian that played in that first World Series. Now that Kentuckian was a man named Clint Thomas. Now Clint, he was from Greenup, Kentucky, close to Ashland, Kentucky, in the east of the eastern part of the state. He was a very good ball player.
Do you want to stop sharing and show?
Yeah, we can show the card now if you'd like. A very good ball player. And we've got this just card here to talk a little bit about him. We've got a little light issues in us, but Clint was very popular in those early days with other Negro League and African-American players. So, as we think about, Jackie Robinson wasn't playing yet, Willie Mays wasn't playing yet, Satchel Paige really wasn't playing yet when you're talking about 1924. But these early guys like Clint, they had their careers, they, and then went on to other careers later. Clint ultimately ends up working for, I believe, the railroad in West Virginia. But he was a very popular player. And because all of his buddies, everybody loved him, he was this tremendous player that played, of course, for the Hilldale team. The Hills, they didn't win against the Monarchs in 1924, but he was a really tremendous player. Good Kentucky player. Well, the fun thing about how this kind of ties to Kentucky history, we've got a lot of different Kentucky ties in with Negro League. But because of Clint's popularity, every year around his birthday, in his older age, his buddies would come and hang out and have birthday parties with him. The guys that used to play ball with him, and it's the late 70s, the early 1980s, they're getting together and this becomes kind of known in the community. And before you know it, you're having what is effectively Negro League reunions, all kind of around Clint Thomas's birthday. And that actually becomes politically known. And there's newspaper men writing about it. And the very first Negro League Hall of Fame ends up being started in Ashland, Kentucky. The governor of Kentucky was on board with it. They had a building. They start having a Negro League Museum and Hall of Fame in Ashland, Kentucky. Unfortunately, Ashland just really didn't have the visitation. There wasn't the best market for it. So then eventually it's moved by this man, Buck O'Neill. Now, Buck O'Neill is a tremendous baseball player. Ended up being, he was, of course, a Negro League player, played with the Monarchs later than, just a little later in the decades, I think 30s or 40s, probably 40s. And he makes the transition to Major League Baseball, and he ends up being a manager, the first African-American manager of Major League Baseball. But Buck also had enough clout that he moved the Negro League Hall of Fame Museum from Ashland, Kentucky to Kansas City, where the Monarchs were. So that's part of our tie as a state to the Negro Leagues, is these early players, and then also we had the first museum in our state. We can probably move to
Somebody asked, which team did he manage?
And once again, this is, I believe the Dodgers, but I cannot, I may be wrong on that. There's a significant chance that I'm wrong on that because, of course, the Dodgers was the team that Jackie Robinson played for, and my memory may be a little clouded on that as well.
Okay, finish this one?
Yes.
Would you like me to go to the next video?
Yes, let's go to the next video a little bit.
Okay.
Now, the Negro Leagues it was very popular, and really, when you think about baseball, it's kind of a fun thing to think about because the rise of the Negro Leagues and its popularity, these tremendous players like Satchel Paige and others,
I've got John Jordan, Buck O'Neill Jr.
Oh yeah, you got Buck O'Neill, and that's on display right now in the exhibit as well. But the leagues itself, and you can probably even go to the next slide after that. You start having these tremendous players.
It's the next one.
Yes,
Is that
the
okay?
next case,
Okay, we'll
yes.
go ahead and start. This is video of our next case.
So this is more of the exhibit, and in this we'll show a few other things. There are really great stories that come out of the Negro League and its history. As you can see here, there's some wonderful signatures in this case. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about is actually there were women that played integrated with men in the Negro Leagues. Now, it seems to happen really after integration, where players like Jackie and others started playing in Major League Baseball. But there were 5 women that played in amongst with the men.
I think here are some of the women.
Yes, here's some of the women, and I've got things we'll show you here in a moment up close. We've actually got cards pulled for you to see. But Negro Leagues is, as you think about it, it was a very fun thing to watch, and there was a very entertaining and very talented group of individuals that played. In this bottom corner here, and we're kind of moving away from it, is an autograph of a gentleman, and it's just out of screen now. But the other aspect of Negro League play is that, while in all baseball, to be honest, at the time when you're looking at early 20th century, is often you had to have a second job, or in the off season you were traveling to different countries to play in the winter leagues. So you'll find that and you see it in some of our autographs, where individuals will actually write down all the different countries that they played baseball in. As I said, sometimes you see that in Major League Baseball, but you really see it in Negro League Baseball, because if you're not, the Mexican leagues or the Cuban leagues, Puerto Rico and other places would easily accept African Americans to play baseball integrated with them. So in the winter or in the off seasons in America, you would just have players that would travel south and play all over this hemisphere, playing baseball in Venezuela, like I said, in Puerto Rico and Mexico and in Cuba. And that's a really interesting part of baseball history, because you see it also with some people in Major League Baseball, but it is a major part of that diverse and integrated diamond where it's people, it's just a really interesting part of the story.
Now I have pulled up some of the women close-ups.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about, I've got a couple of autographs that are in our cases. There were about 5 women that played integrated with the men in Negro League Baseball. So this is Mamie Peanut Johnson, and we've got autographs for 2 of those women. So here's the autograph for Peanut Johnson, and we can show you her picture here in a moment. And she was a wonderful player, played integrated with the men, and really broke, you think about doing something different. When we think about, say, A League of Their Own and that movie, and in the 1940s, women had their own baseball league. The Negro Leagues actually let women play with the men. We still don't see that. So they were really ahead of the curve. But also you got to think about, man, how amazing were these ladies to play with these guys. and travel with them, and they must have been really special people. The other one that I want to show you is this Tony Stone autograph. Tony was yet another of the 5 women that played baseball integrated with men in the Negro Leagues. And of course, at the bottom of that is her autograph. So it's a fun story that really I've not had a chance to delve into the way that I wanted to. And it ties in, I believe, a great deal with integration and how integration from the Negro Leagues and African-American players being able to play in Major League Baseball kind of pulled a lot of the players that everybody wanted to see from the Negro Leagues. People were coming to see the Satchel Pages and the Willie Mazes and the Jackie Robinsons. And they would just start watching them play with the Dodgers or whoever they were playing with at the time. So these Negro Leagues had to find something else that would be interesting for people to watch. And they needed to fill the space. They're losing players to professional baseball, so they need to continue being viable teams, and they want to stay in business. So they're finding good players anywhere they can find them. The Reds player, Doug Flynn, from years ago, his father's name was Bobby Flynn, and Doug and Bobby, they're white, not African American by any means, but during that kind of same time period, Bobby was a good player. He was just a little small and he couldn't ever get into Major League Baseball. So what happened is Bobby Flynn ended up being the first white player to play integrated in the Negro League, and he played for the Lexington Hustlers. So it's just a little side fun story that you think about as Negro League ball. They were really accepting, I think, of a lot of things, and they wanted to have entertaining and good baseball to watch. So there's lots of kind of fun stories here as we talk about it. Now it's kind of time to discuss integration. Integration is an interesting topic, and I'm going to probably have to go through this if we're running out of time. I don't want to.
We are at about almost 7 o'clock.
So we're gonna jump through this pretty quickly. Of course, in 1947, and this image here is 1946. This is one of the rare pieces that we're currently displaying in our exhibit, and that is the Montreal team that when Jackie Robinson signed with the Dodgers, they sent him to Canada to play integrated in with their minor team. This is a very rare picture of that team in 1946 with Jackie Robinson on it. So I kind of wanted to share that with you. Jackie playing in an integrated team before he goes to the Dodgers in 47 and officially breaks the color barrier in Major League Baseball. Jackie is a wonderful, he's got a wonderful history. And once again, the baseball commissioner that decided that it was time to integrate baseball was a man named Happy Chandler, who had been governor of the state of Kentucky and would later, after being the baseball commissioner, become governor of the state of Kentucky a second time. So another good Kentucky tie to integration and Negro League baseball. Now, I want to cover some other things. So
I just wanted to mention that Mark Koenig said he went to an Indianapolis Clowns game at the old Covington ballpark in the late 50s. Meadowlark Lemon was the feature player. And Hank Aaron was with them too. They were an exhibition team, the Harlem Globetrotters. I believe that would be the female player tie.
Yes. And the Clowns, the Clowns actually played through the 1980s. They were one of the last Negro League baseball team to play. And I hadn't heard that they played at the Covington ballpark, but that is amazing. They did, and I know they were kind of an exhibition team, just a fun, amazing team to see. Baseball, so as I've gotten into these stories, I'm fascinated by all the fun things that baseball kind of had been and how it's changed in the last 50 or 60 years. It's still a wonderful sport to watch, but when you get to talk to the old timers, it really, I think it was a special thing in the day. So we want to cover, we've done a pretty good job giving an introduction to, of course, integration in Negro League baseball. Here, of course, is our first Cincinnati African-American player, Chuck Harmon, and Chuck was the first African-American Cincinnati Red. The same year in 1954 that he starts playing, there's a Latin, sometimes referred to as an Afro-Latin player, Nino Escala, that plays at the same time Chuck. They're both in the same batting. They start the same game, the whole thing. So you get Nino and you get Chuck playing 1954. Wonderful stories. So this kind of is a nice transition after Chuck integrated in to the Reds to start talking about just a little bit about like Cuban baseball. And we can probably switch to another slide if we would like right now, before we show a few more things, because I want to make sure we don't run out of time. Now, Cuban baseball gets started in the 1860s. And I think 1864 or so, you start having the first, Cubans are introduced to the sport of baseball.
We did have a
we
picture
missed.
of Charlie.
Okay, let me real quick.
My mom's favorite.
Yes, let's real quick talk about another Negro League ball player, Charlie Pride. Now, Charlie Pride, you may, of course, as you see there, the country music singer, Charlie Pride.
Country music superstar.
Yes, he's a superstar. The fun thing about Charlie Pride is in his early life, he played baseball. He was a pitcher in the Negro Leagues. And one of the fun stories that occasionally he would tell, and you can find out, and we talk a little bit about in the exhibit, is during his days being a pitcher in the Negro Leagues, at one point in time, he and another player were playing for a team, and he got traded. The two of them got traded to another team, but they weren't traded for another player or another two players. They were traded for a bus. So it's kind of a funny story to think about people being traded for a bus. But hey, if your team really desperately needs a bus, well, what's that bus worth to you? A player and a pitcher. So it's a hard thing sometimes to bend your mind around. But Charlie, of course, as he gets traded around, he ends up with a manager that realizes he can sing. So before the games, he's given a little extra money to have a short concert before he plays. And that's kind of the introduction and the beginning of his music career, and it skyrockets from there. So it's a fun story. Now, when we talk about, let's see, there's
Donald Johnson.
Donald Johnson. Okay. Another quick Covington story with a gentleman that played in the Negro Leagues. Donald Johnson, he's part of the Northern Kentucky Sports Hall of Fame. He was a small guy. They called him Groundhog, and he was from Covington. We don't have too many players. There's a handful, maybe 2 or 3 that I know of off the top of my head that actually played in the Negro Leagues that were from Covington. Well, Donald was one of them, and he was actually signed to the Reds in 46, around the same time that Jackie Robinson starts getting signed with the Dodgers. Donald didn't have a lot of other African-American kids and black kids in the neighborhood to play baseball with, but the white kids would let him play as long as he was the catcher. And he kind of learned to stay real low to the ground so he could catch a ball, and he was less likely to get hit with a bat and other things. And that influenced his gameplay through the rest of his life. Donald ends up playing for one of the Chicago teams. I think it was the Chicago American Giants. He kind of signs up with them. The Reds, so the Reds story.
Chicago American Giants.
Yeah, the Chicago American Giants. The Reds story is that he signs with the Reds. He and another Latin player, they get sent to, I think, the team in Iowa. So they're on the train. They get there because it was segregation. It was the time it was. They were not allowed off the train until everybody else got off the train. And unfortunately, the people in that community and the sheriff and the mayor all waited for them to get off the train, and they would not let them off the train. And they said they could not play because of their race, their color, with their team. So they sent them back to Cincinnati. And as this is Donald's story, then the Reds cut him for the contract and he couldn't play for them. He eventually goes to Crosley Field. He knew some guys that were playing with the Chicago American Giants. He ends up playing with them. Later in his life, he was teaching baseball through his 70s to kids in Cincinnati in high school and things. So he was a really an amazing role model, a wonderful person, another guy, one of these guys that I would have loved to meet. So now we're going to try to transition a little bit into Cuban ball.
We just want to mention though that Rick Vokey said that Buck O'Neill coached for the Chicago Cubs before he was a scout for the Kansas City Royals.
There we go. That's it. Yes.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you. Because my memory, as I said at the beginning of this, I know enough to be conversational, but I am not an expert in all this subject matter. So I want to talk a little bit about Cuban baseball. As I started saying, Cuban ball gets started really.
Is this the right video? This one? This exhibit?
No, that's we need to go to the next video.
Okay.
Because that's the Jackie Robinson case.
Gotcha. Here we go.
So Cuban ball gets started in the 1860s. By the later 19th century, it's very popular. And the players that were playing in Cuba and other Latin countries start really getting noticed by Major League Baseball. So the first, and you can see right here, the first team to really sign Cubans was the Cincinnati Reds. And the Cincinnati Reds end up actually paying attention to Cuban players for years to come, and really scouting them. And you can see that if you get to talk, of course, to guys like Tony Perez, or I spoke with Cookie Rojas, and he had signed with the Reds minors, really, he was like 16 or 17. But the first team, the first professional team to sign Cuban players was the Reds. So it's a nice story to see. And by 1919, when the Reds won the World Series, you had players like Adolfo Lug, who was a Cuban, playing with the Reds. That whole buildup with the Reds before the buildup of to win the 1919 World Series, you see the Reds actually playing a number of light complected people of a diverse background. So they still wasn't ready for a dark-skinned baseball player at that time, but you've got light-skinned Cubans playing. You've got, of course, Jim Thorpe played for the Reds in 1916, and he's Native American. So the Reds really were looking to build a World Series winning team, and they were less concerned about where you came from as long as you could play baseball. And it's kind of a fun thing to think that that's part of our regional heritage. But Cuban baseball was a major, if you think about Leo Cardenas and as I said, Tony Perez and Cookie Rojas, and you've got all these great players that you start seeing in the Reds bullpen and also or the Reds dugouts that are playing in our region. So many of them are Cubans, and that's early part of that 20th century heritage with the Reds, and you can see that in this exhibit. And we think about really, like, if you think of the players, Big Red Machine or earlier, there's a lot of amazing players that were of Cuban ancestry, and you were getting Cubans right up through Castro. And if you think about Fidel Castro, and he loved baseball. Cuba is a baseball country, and they really had tremendous players. And there's so much of that history that we try to share in this exhibit, and there's a lot of autographs from the Cuban players as well. We'll move on from that because
We're about 7:13.
Yeah, so I've gone a little long on part of the exhibit. I wanted to move also to Latin players. So Latin, Cuban and Latin players, you start really with, there's all that interaction with the winter leagues and people going south. And Major League Baseball really starts realizing that there's some tremendous baseball players kind of south of the American border. And especially after we get integrated baseball in 1947, you start seeing active recruiting of ball players from places like Cuba, from Venezuela, Davy Concepcion and others. Your Roberto Clementes. Right here is, as I talked earlier about Nino Escala playing with the Reds in 1954. Here's Nino, and there's an autograph. He's, unfortunately, we recently lost Nino. But he was, an early Reds, as often he's referred to as Afro-Latin kind of player. And he's one to really think about. That was a tremendous player. Now, one that is very special in baseball history and is Roberto Clemente. He was, I believe, Puerto Rican. And Roberto, he played with local guys like Jim Bunning, and was well known, as a tremendous baseball player. And he had a heart, just a tremendous heart. I've never heard anybody say anything bad about Roberto Clemente, and unfortunately, he died way too early. There had been an earthquake or a hurricane, I believe, that hit Nicaragua, and it was in December of, I think, 1976. And he had been flying relief missions from Puerto Rico to Nicaragua, bringing food and supplies to the Nicaraguans. And one of the flights, after they took off, his plane went down in the ocean, and we lost Roberto Clemente. But now even Major League Baseball honors him. There's I believe, a service award that they give in honor of Roberto Clemente. But there's so many, like when you think about the contributions of Latin American players to Major League Baseball. If you think about the guys that were in the lineup for the Reds, whether they're Cubans or Latin American players that were part of the Big Red Machine, or, just in the last 50 years, how many of those guys that were just players that were amazing players that we think of they were from Venezuela, they were from Puerto Rico, they were from Cuba, they were from Mexico or other places. So that's really part of the treasure that we're trying to share with a diverse diamond. And it's been, for me as a curator, I've learned so much about these individuals, their struggles, and it's fun and interesting. It's an interesting part of history, and it's something that I've been really excited to share with everybody. And I hope you've had an opportunity to come and see the exhibit, that if you have an interest in this. As I said, this has just been an introduction to the subject matter and an introduction to this exhibit. There's so many little aspects of this exhibit that we could go into detail for. There's so many things that actually you could just start a lifetime worth of research and go down rabbit holes that I would love to go down, but I can't always go down them. So this exhibit is something that we've been very proud here at Behringer-Crawford to house and to display this whole summer and earlier, because it gives us an opportunity to share stories that we don't always think about and show people just how amazing baseball in a different way. I mean, baseball was really an amazing sport. It still is an amazing sport. It's changed a lot over the years. And when, as I've had the opportunity to talk to some of these individuals recently in person, men like Tony Perez or Cookie Rojas and others, for another project we're working on, it's interesting to see the passion that people have had, and as you learn about really how it's changed. I got into this exhibit and was working with the individual that brought the exhibit to us, and I started asking questions. Well, why is it this way? Why? Because it seemed, of course, you ask questions and you come up with different questions. Sometimes you come up with answers. But this is a special thing, and I wanted to share it with you all. And I hope you've enjoyed this conversation.
Do you had a couple things down there? Do you want to share?
Oh yeah, I've got a couple of.
But I do want to mention the winner of our trivia
question.
That was, I believe, Janet Jenkins. So Janet, if you could please in the chat, if you could send me a message with your address, I would love to send you your prize. So congratulations to Janet.
Well, one of the fun things, and this is going to go back to more Negro League history versus Cuban and Latin history. One of the fun things, the collector that's brought us this collection, it's not just cards and not just autographs. Sometimes you get things like, let's see if I can get this here. Sorry, folks.
Oh, thank you, Sage. Sage said this has been a really cool history hour.
Excellent.
I think Sage has been one of our younger viewers that's been watching.
Excellent.
Thank you for tuning in, Sage. And the next one, he's asking what the next one's about. But the next one is going to be a fun one.
Oh, it's
Sage.
going to be a lot of fun.
The next one is going to be about Legos. So the next one is going to be about the OKIL.
Yeah, the Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana Lego Users Group, OKILUG.
Yes, and how they got started. They have their roots here in Kentucky.
Yeah, they're a Northern Kentucky group.
So that's going to be our next week's.
And they also partner a great deal with us. So
yeah, we've got some really cool Legos here, and some minions and everything.
Yes.
So you want to show this?
Yes, I was showing you the Wheaties box, and here's a fun thing. This is a nice regional tie. Okay. A starting lineup by Kenner, which was in Cincinnati, but that's, of course, Willie Mays and Jackie Robinson starting lineup. So the collector that brings us all these wonderful exhibits, or this particular wonderful exhibit, he brings all kinds of neat things. So if you come and see it, it's not just going to be cards. It's going to be, bobbleheads and starting lineups and Wheaties boxes and old vintage game pieces and baseball cards. Here's the two first Cubans that played for the Reds. These are the original cards. So there's just all kinds of fun stuff that you can see here in our exhibit. So I'm glad you've enjoyed the presentation.
Yeah, before we go, I want to just thank everyone. Thank you, Jason, for
Thanks
this
for having
wonderful
me.
talk and presentation. But also, I want everybody to know that Fresh Art is just around the corner. We are on 10 days away, I believe.
Yeah.
Fresh Art tickets are now available for the event. It's going to be on September 18th at the museum. You can purchase your tickets now at bcmuseum.org, as well as bidding has began on the silent art auctions that we actually have on, that you can actually come here to BCM and see for yourself, or you can go to the website, and that's also at bcmuseum.org. So please check those out. Also, for more Northern Kentucky history throughout the week, you can check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. So please like and subscribe. I think that is going to be about all we have time for this evening. So thanks again to all of our sponsors and supporters of BCM, the staff, trustees, and members of BCM. As I mentioned before, we will be having Rodney Dykes is who's going to be coming to discuss the OKELA, or Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana Lego Users Group.
Rodney's amazing.
Yeah, so that will be back. There will not be a Northern Kentucky History Hour next week, but he will be with us on Wednesday, September 22nd. So that's going to be a fun one. So until then, I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and everybody just have a great night and come see the exhibit. Come see all this amazing. It really is an amazing exhibit to come check out.
It really is. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, so come visit BCM. Hope to see you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.